So fantastic. Welcome, everybody. This is called The Magic of Story. And Sarah and I are wanting to share with you if you're wanting to write something beyond just for yourself. And we wanted to share about 45 minutes. So I'm Kate Emmerson. I am a best-selling author. I am very proud to say an international speaker. And I gallivant around the world running retreats and masterminds. And I just want to welcome you to today's call. And Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yes, and thank you. So I'm Sarah Bullen. Excuse me. I'm a book mentor and writing coach, and I'm also a literary agent. So now I worked with writers kind of all over the world for many, many years to get their books to a place where they're first written and then published. So we are recording this because we know many of you have registered, so you get the recording. So don't worry too much. And we're going to have an opportunity later to ask questions. And really what we wanted to talk about is this idea that you have a story that you want other people to read. So this is quite a big thing to put out in the world, because the second we move from the domain of saying, I have a story that I want to share with my family, I have a story I like to tell, and we move into this space where we say, you know what? I want to write this. I want to put it down, and I actually want readers. I want other people to read it. It becomes a bigger endeavor. You're moving out of the realm of journaling or whatever you may do, your morning pages, and I have nothing against those, but they aren't what is required to get a book out there, published, and with people reading your story. So I've got about 7 points I want to go through. What does it take to write this book and engage and pull other people into your life? And the first point I'm going to make is that you need to understand that the story is not about you. Now that sounds quite strange because obviously it is about you, isn't it? And people come or phone all the time and say, I want to write a story about my disabled child, my battle with motor neuron, my son's journey through Nepal, my battle with bulimia. And I always say to them, that's fantastic. That sounds like a fabulous story. But I hope it's about more, because if you're inviting readers to read something, you need to remember that they don't know you. They don't know who you are. So they're not reading it because they know you. So why are they reading your story? And that's the question all writers have to ask themselves. If the story is not about me, if I and my life and what I've experienced is simply the illustration, something I'm revealing, then what is the story about? And when I ask you those questions, I'm looking for a big word. I'm looking for a word that everybody wants to relate to or read. And these are words like, it's a story about courage, it's a story about revenge, it's a story about love, it's a story about grief, it's a story about honoring your ancestors, it's a story about overcoming odds. So that's the very first step in writing a story that people want to read, is understanding they don't know you. And you're just going to use yourself and what you've learned in your life as a way to connect with something more deep in somebody else. And that's a hard question to ask yourself as a writer, because it's asking you to elevate your story into something universal. But I want you to look at those books that you've read or that have touched you or that you want to pick off the shelf. And very seldom is it about the person. It's about the journey. So your first step is understanding the journey and elevating it that can touch on the touch point in somebody else's life. And really, what we like to say in nonfiction writing is that your book needs a big idea. So all books need a big idea. And we like, and that's why we buy them. So straight up nonfiction, you start with your big idea. And in memoirs, you unveil it. You unveil the lessons. I think this is hard because we often think, I have a lot to share. I have a lot of lessons I want to give. And you're going to give them. And that's why people are reading the book. It's because of the lessons you've learned along the way. So if you've fought cancer and won, if you've been in an abusive relationship and come out surviving, what is that about? Is it about triumph? Is it about survival? Is it about winning? Is it about, beating all the odds. Okay, so I'm looking for words that are not about just you and your story. The second thing I really want to stress, and those of you who know me well know that this is something I talk about a lot, and Kate is smiling. She knows the word that's about to come out of my mouth, and that is genre. Genre is the beginning point of all, shall she put it in the chat? Genre is how you start all books. And by genre, I mean what book, what shelf rather, in the bookshop am I going to stack your book on when I am stocking the shelves? Or when you're listing your book on Amazon, on which category, under which category are you going to list it? Is it going to be under biography, or is it going to be under business advice? Is it going to be under biography sports, or is it going to be under inspirational journeys? And there is a shelf called inspirational, by the way. Is it going to be under Christian publishing, inspirational, or is it going to be under inspirational, in brackets, spiritual? So these are questions that as a writer wanting to share their story, you have to start understanding. So the drive to share your story is age old. It's centuries old. It's how we connect as human beings. It's how we give other people lessons. It's how we mark transitions in life. We want to tell stories. It's ancient. But publishing is very 21st century. And as the storyteller, you have to understand that your book will be sold one day. And if you very carefully select the genre, you give yourself a fighting chance, because you know, and I know, that when you buy a book and it's a particular book, you expect particular things out of that book. If you're buying a cookbook, you expect recipes. If you're buying a big concept sales book, you expect strategies, tricks, and tips. You want to walk out when you finish that book being a better salesman. When you read a heartfelt journey into pain and loss, you want some things in those books. You want a dark night of the soul. You want trials and tribulations. You want people creating problems along the way and having to overcome them. And you want, at the end of the day, some light shone on a way forward. So we understand that when we buy books as readers, and you all know the kind of books you like to buy, you know what's in those kinds of books. And you very deliberately don't choose to buy particular books because you don't like what's in those books. You may not like business leadership books because it's not your thing, but you may absolutely love to buy, health and fitness books, for example. So please, as writers and storytellers, understand that the work of a contemporary storyteller is to deliver your story in a way that publishers can publish, booksellers know how to sell, and readers want to read. Where are we at a time, Kate? I'm looking at the clock. Okay. So that's 2 points. You're muted, but that's all right. And I'm going to talk just for a little bit, then we're going to have some questions. I'm just going to go through some of my bigger tips. The third point to understand is that books need structure. And this is fundamental. I mean, I'm a structure fanatic, and really, Kate and I are running 2 big mentorships at the moment. And the first few weeks of the mentorship, all I want to see is your book structure. All I want to know is that you've got this architecture in place over which you're going to drape your story. And structure is so important when you start to write in the long form. I'm not talking about an article, 3,000 word article. I'm not even talking about a TED talk or 4,000 word, a TEDx talk, 20 minutes, 4,000 words. I'm talking about when you're moving into the domain of writing 50,000 words minimum. And that's what a publishable book is. It's 50,000 words. When you've got that length of a project that you're tackling, there is no room for just winging it. Because what you will find is that you have told your story in 20,000 words, and that's not publishable. 20,000 words is a short ebook. It's a little quick read. And that's not what people, Kate's got a 20,000 word little book in her fingers. We're not looking for that. And that's quite hard. We're looking, and I just had a chat with an audiobook reader recently, 10 hours of listening. That's what a reader wants. 8 to 10 hours of reading, 15 hours of reading, depending on how fast or slowly you read. They want to step into your world. They want to be dragged out of their lives and into your life or into your book that you're creating if it's a novel. And that's the calling of story. And that's why books are just bought and bought and bought, is because we all want that little glimpse into somebody else's universe. And when you're shifting gear and you're not a reader, you're a writer, you have to start unpacking, how will I spread my story out so that it covers the length of time required to hold a reader's interest for that long? And really, it's a simple process, she says with a smile. It's called a well-devised table of contents or a very detailed scene list. When I work with writers to plot a book, I have a very particular plotting method, which involves a number of plot points that all stories need. And if you don't have enough, and in a novel, I'm going to tell you that there's 80 plot points you need in a novel, 80 things that need to happen to your hero to make his life difficult, unsurmountable, challenging, and force him to overcome these odds. And if you don't have enough points, I'm telling you, your story's done in 40,000 words, if you're lucky. And that's what many writers will tell you. So structure is what sets you free. I think, Kate, we even have a module in our mentorship with that title, Your Structure Will Set You Free. When you know how you're going to break your story up, how you're going to carve it out into moments, then you can start, your book will just flow. Because the problem with most of us who want to write about ourselves or our expertise or what we've learned is it's kind of a little bit of a big mashup in our head. And the challenge is to really delineate, and that is your work. That's the work. Are you putting your finger up? So
I am, because I've been so quiet for so long, like a little mouse. What I wanted to say is I was just thinking of one of our writers who was in Greece and who came to write her story. And at 35,000, I think it was 34,000 and something, she's like, I'm done. I have nothing more to write. And we said, well, then it's not a book. It can be an ebook. It can be a short story. It can be something else. You can put it into part of an online course. And then she sat with it for almost another 8-9 months. Then she came back at it because she found a new angle. And now she's been able to not pad it out with junk, but to fill it out, to finesse it, to add more story, to add layer depth. And now it is becoming a fully fledged book. But on the first pass, like it was under 35K. And it was like, okay, there's another time you've got to come back at this. It wasn't done. It couldn't be called her first draft of her book. It was a segment of it. Sarah, should I just say if we have a little break at this point and just see if there's any questions around what you have said already?
And because everybody here used the same link to join, you all have the name Renata.
So you're all Renata, some of you today, so you can change your name on your thing. So we've never had technology. We do so much on technology and it changes so fast. So this is the first that we've had multiple Renatas. So hello. So if you, for those of you who might be phoning in, then just mute yourself, or if you can pop it in the chat and just say, I have a question. For those of you we can see, just pop your hand up. If anyone has a question, or pop it in the chat around something that has been shared already. So just indicate if anyone has a question, because you don't often get us live like this.
I've just spotted a question that I've just...
Any questions? Going, gone.
Okay. I just spotted a question, Kate, that somebody asked in their form, which is actually interesting enough what I addressed, is how do you elevate a journal to a memoir? Okay, so I started to speak about this. Journaling is really, and journaling and writing is when you write with a lack of awareness of reader. And now I've been a journalist for many, many years. And when you're a journalist, you always are cognizant of your reader. So the calling, and as I started to say that, the very first calling is to understand that you're journaling for yourself and you start to construct story for reader. So I can't read the chats, but I will go back and read those now. So really it's about those very simple things that I've started to put in place. It's putting a peg in the ground and understanding that the book's got to be sold. Firstly, it's understanding the publishing market and that books are sold by genre. And really we can't get around this, and please don't mistake genre for formulaic writing. It's not the same. It's really a sales mechanism of how your book is going to be sold and marketed. It's really the first question I ask as an agent. I only represent particular genres. All publishers only publish particular genres. And so really the beginning point of shifting from being a journaler, being a scribbler, being a note taker, to moving to the realm of published author is a huge commitment and is starting to understand what makes your book publishable. Sorry, I'm going to open that chat.
Yeah, I can also read them, Sarah.
Okay. So the next
So let me just say, so there's one that's similar. How do you stop memoir own story going into navel gazing? So that was Ingrid. So again, we've covered that. So big idea, structure, genre, plot points. So you've got to know what you're saying and why. So it's not kind of this diatribe of yourself. Diana's got something interesting. So she says, I was always fundamentally taught that my story or whatever I write about is all about me. So that's a difficult hurdle to write. So I just wanted to say, so the thing is that if you're writing about you, unless you are a celebrity or someone that has got a big TV show or someone that people really, the Queen of England or someone that we actually give a damn about, but for the rest of us, actually, it's not about us. It's about how does your reader find themselves in your story? How do they find an insight or a lesson or a piece of wisdom or that's interesting, or the escapism, but they have to find themselves in your story. Otherwise, there's not much point in it for them. It's just going to be, because we often ask readers, well, so what? Who cares? Why should someone read your book? There's got to be a message in it for them, even if you're not telling them the message. Or, obviously with novels, it's slightly different. And that was Brajita's story is what is the upper limit for books? So maybe just so for memoir nonfiction, it's often like 60, 70, maybe 80, but for novels, it's different.
Yeah, so we used to say memoirs we'll generally tell you to write to 80,000 words in a memoir, nonfiction, and contemporary publishing cuts it down to about 50. Why? People have a limited attention span. Readers do. You know yourself. When you're reading nonfiction, you want quite a quick read. You don't want necessarily, you want to get the key points of what they're selling you fairly quickly. You want to understand it. You want to put it into practice. I mean, Kate and I just both bought a book called Your 12-Week Work Year. Your 12-week year. And this is the complete genius of contemporary publishing. Number one, I bought into the solution in the title. I've bought this book because I want a 12-week year. That's the only reason I'm buying it. And I bought this book. Kate told me to. I must be more productive. And because I also want to be explained to by an expert in his field how to put this into practice. So that's the first thing to know. I just want to speak about the it's all about me question, because that's such an important one. So firstly, the question was, my teacher told me all writing is about me. And that's very Jungian. So in the Jungian theory, every character is actually a part of you, inside of you, an aspect of self. And of course, it is all about you. Your story is all about you. You are using something you've been through to shed some light for other people. And I'm pushing you to make it more publishable, to say books need an edge, books need an angle, books need a solution for people to pick them up. But at the end of the day, a lot of people write their story just to record it. And there is a beauty and an honor in doing that. And we don't all have to end up on the bestseller list. Sometimes it's enough to record your family history. And that's why so many people write. In fact, one of my very first few evolutions as a writer was I was hired to go to people in their 70s, 80s who couldn't really type, and I would write their story down for them for 10,000 words, 20,000 words. And it really was just a record of life. So there's no particular reason you have to write the book in this way that entices people to read it. But if you want to be published, if you want your book to ultimately land with an agent or a publisher, these are things to just put in your backpack of tools to understand how you start to write better or in a way that is more publishable. So the other way about elevating your book above journal or finding a way to write a book is to understand that books involve drama. This is a hard one. And most often when I get a manuscript on its first draft, I make a lot of comments in red ink. And this is the one I make the most. And the words are, Kate may have heard these, up the ante, more drama, more emotion, more angst. Why do I say that? Nobody wants to read a bland story about vanilla experiences. So we want to read a book because we are, Kate's laughing. I know
I'm laughing because we've got someone writing a BDSM book at the moment. The opposite of vanilla.
Vanilla. Yeah. So, this is also what elevates your book above a journal. It's actually it's taking what may have been, a fraught time in your life and elevating to the realm of story. And story means that you have to go on the hero's journey is the basis of all storytelling. And the hero's journey is about becoming more, overcoming obstacles, encountering allies and enemies, and coming back with what Joseph Campbell calls the elixir. So in a traditional novel, the elixir, the prize would be something like the golden chalice or, something, specific. But in a memoir, less have to undergo a hero's journey. We need to meet you at the beginning, at the lowest point of your journey. And we need to understand that you are going to have to become a different person to survive this. And we want to follow you as reader. We really want to follow you. We don't want to follow you into the glory and how wonderful you are and all these fabulous things you learned. We want to follow you into the pit of despair. We want to be in the gutter with you in your addiction. We want to be walking through the dark with you. Because then, later in your book, where we see that you are starting to learn and grow and shift and understand, then we see it as reader and we understand that you've gone on that journey and that you've earned the prize. So don't give the prize at the beginning in a memoir, earn it, all right? And that's the power of memoir. That's why addiction memoirs are so popular. And that's why there's such a huge rise. I don't know if you guys know something called quitlet. So that's one of the things that's huge at the moment. Quitting alcohol, quitting something, quitlet. We want stories as publishers, quitlet, yeah, of people who've quit. Like, it's hard to quit something. It's hard to quit alcohol. It's hard to quit heroin. It's hard to quit a bad relationship. It's hard to quit an eating disorder. So all of these, the basis of all these stories are the hero's journey. Because when you've quit and when you stand up there in the end on the podium, you're a hero. And that's why memoir is so eminently readable, is we don't have to be that addict. I can just read your story and know what it tastes like. I'm laughing. Where are we at, Kate, time-wise? Okay, good. So
we've been going half an hour.
Okay. I think I'm going to make one more point, Kate, and then I know you've got some things to say because, and I think it's going to lead into your point, is when you want to be an author or a writer, the hardest thing is, the thing that's going to take you there is you do the work. And there's this sort of illusion that creativity is just like something you're born with. Like, they're just creative people who can write, or these wonderful artists who can paint. And there's nobody standing up there who's got a book on the shelf who hasn't done the hard work it takes. And let me tell you, because we have got 2 big mentorships running. Some people have been working on their books for 3 years. This is not easy stuff. This is not fly by night. This is grounded, grueling, hard, consistent work. And that's what it takes to become published. You do the work. And the work is a long journey in becoming an author. The very first step only, is writing your first draft of your book. There are many steps
over there.
Huh?
And I take over from there.
Take on. So yes, Kate take over from there. And Kate and I will tell you a little bit about the book we just wrote.
Yes, so I just wanted to start off by saying, because we call this the magic of story. I think so often, I think it happens to artists, to writers, to anyone doing that really creative right brain endeavor, is we think that, oh, when the creative muse strikes, I will write, or I will journal, or I will paint, or I will do my embroidery. That is such bullshit, okay? It requires the discipline of putting yourself in the realm of your creative muse, of your creative spirit. So if you follow any novelists or memoirists or nonfiction writers, people who do this professionally, it is their job. They do it for 8 hours a day. They have a discipline, they have a rule, they have a rhythm. So when we take people through the mentorship and we ask them to write their first draft, it's often just about purging and putting it down in kind of the best way you can, but often that first way is pretty revolting, or as Annie Lamott calls it, a shitty first draft. But it requires the tenacity to sit your pretty butt down in a chair and write or make your notes or type. It is lonely, it is grueling, it requires commitment, it requires saying no to other things. And if we all sit around waiting for that creative muse to strike and think, oh, I'll tell my story when I really feel drawn to. No, you won't. Because that is actually just another form of procrastination. It's another form of playing small. It's another form of letting the fear be bigger than your need to tell the story. So the magic of story requires the art of discipline with it. The two go hand in hand. And so Neil Gaiman, sorry, I've got a pussycat going a bit mad behind me. He says you are either writing or you are not. So one of the things when you're writing is getting into the discipline of, I'm going to make time to sit at my computer. So if I'm going to sit at my computer to write from 9 to 11, I need to be sitting at my computer. It doesn't mean I can get up and go make coffee or go outside and water the garden or go and feed the cat. That's your procrastination technique. So if you know those take an hour, that's your procrastination hour. And then you sit down and you are either writing or you are not. So the moment you give yourself permission to go off and do a different proposal or some emailing, you might physically be writing, but you're not writing your book. So you always have to match the creativity with the discipline. Otherwise, you will not get your first level of your story arc down. And writers often don't like us telling them that. So we always have structure. You have to put dates in your diary. You have to carve out retreat time. You have to do what we call bum days or block time. And you have to, like Sarah and I do, you have to put them in your diary, because otherwise everything else is going to take precedence. So I put in writing blocks of, I'm about to work on my 5th book. Sarah and I sat together at the beginning in February, and in 5 days sat together side by side, screeching with laughter, working really hard, glasses of wine, too much coffee, eggs on the go, but we were always writing. And we held each other. We were like, every now and then I'd be like, Sarah, sit down, boom, and we have to write. So you have to learn the art of anchoring yourself in the physical dimension, while your brain and heart can go off into the storytelling dimension. But you've got to find a way to pull them from the ether, from your heart, from your soul, and through your body, through your fingers, onto the keyboard. Otherwise, it does not happen. For some people, they can also still tell stories a little more easily in the verbal way. So sometimes I say to people, well, then tell your story verbally, like Sarah does with ghostwriting. Sometimes it's interviews. You can use your phone, dictaphone, tell your story. That's like writing time. Someone can transcribe it for you. But there is also something very magical that happens when you are writing or typing. You access parts of your brain. It's also about knowing when to use paper and pen versus when to use a computer. They, again, are different faculties. So when I'm planning, I did that last Saturday. I did a 4-hour bum time. I'm in Malaga in southern Spain. Again, I carved out the time. I said, I am going to do the planning of my book in this session. I had a bunch of other writers that connected and came to join me. And the moment I opened my book, paper, and I thought, right, I'm going to plan my book. Within 2 hours, I had planned everything. I thought it was going to take me 4. But I had dedicated the time. I had set my intention. I verbalized it to my friends. And I said, I am going into planning mode. And then because I'd carved out the time and I was being mindful, it flowed. So I invited the creative muse because I had put in the parameters of I'm going to sit down and do this. So the one always helps the other. And I think too often as writers, we think it's all just about the creativity and the pulling of the story, and we forget about the need for structure and discipline. So that's why Sarah and I, we're always the two. You have to like toggle between both of those to get your first draft out. Then you can go to second draft. Then you can go to best draft. Then you can get your proposal out. Then you can query to agents or publishers, because that's the flow. And you can't move on to the second phase until you've finished the first phase. So that's always part of our push. How are you committing to your book? Are you going to gather with writers in your city, in your town, in your village? It's easy to do. I came to Malaga knowing nobody. I now have 15 people in my writing group in a month. So you can gather people in your city, in your town. I don't care where you are. It's how we do it on our mentorships. We say, if you're in the city, gather, or come and join us on our group and tell us, I'm writing what I'm writing. It's also why we run retreats around the world. And I know some of you know that, and it's why you are either here because you're booked to join us, but we change where we're going. And in 2020, we are going back to our beloved Greece because we cannot keep away. And we do something called a retreat and a residency. They are different things, and I'll leave that to Sarah to explain the difference. And then we are going to Tuscany. So we've chosen somewhere that both Sarah and I have been to at different times, in southern Tuscany on the border of Umbria. And we're going there for a retreat. It's already, I think, half sold out, and it's in a year's time. But retreats are about, they normally cost a fair amount of money, so you take them seriously. You see it in your diary and you go, oh, I know I'm going to spend that immersion time. I know I'm dedicating that pocket of my year. So it almost like you start putting it in your vibrational escrow is what I call it. And you start going, oh, I know I'm going to just savor it and sink into it. And then you're with others doing the same. And that's also what aids creativity, is when you have group synergy and other people's ideas. And when you're over dinner sipping some vino and eating some tapas and someone says, oh, I did this, and it bounces an idea. Because so often when you're writing, you're on your own. And it's really that much harder to write when you're on your own and you don't have the energy of group dynamics and other people's ideas and thoughts and love for you and your book. So the power of retreats, whether you do it with us, whether you do it with another coach, whether you do it with your own friends, but we always say every year, see if you can carve out like that longer block time, or as we call it, retreat time, because it sits there calling you, and you know you've then got a slice of your life that is carved out for your book. Sarah Bullen, do you want to just maybe explain the difference between a retreat and a residency?
I will do. And then let's look if there are any questions. I just saw one to come up that I'll speak about like how to plot and all that sort of stuff. So the difference between a retreat and a residency really is that a retreat is a very guided journey. We are taking you through a step-by-step process of how to get your book written, be it a novel, and we'll specify it's a novel retreat, or memoir, non-fiction retreat. You will walk down this road where we have lots and lots of information sessions and take you through the process. A residency is really when you've got a work in progress. You want to lock the door, keep everybody away, and you want to be working on your own project. We can have very advanced writers on that, on their 5th books, or we can have somebody who's just starting a poetry book. So that it's really just about, both of them are really about what Kate was saying. It's about locking the doors and not letting life interfere, and that really is what it takes at the end phase very often.
I was going to say, in our residency this year in Greece, we always plan less from our side, so it's less input and it's more feedback and questions and reaching out to each other, and it's that holding space, less of us doing like instruction work. And even though we had planned so little, all the writers kept saying, leave us the hell alone, leave us, we're not coming to the next session, leave us alone, we just want to write. And they'd go and sit in their rooms or sit in the joint space or go to a cafe. And they kept saying, no, we just want to write. And then we'd ask them to come and do reading and feedback. And then there's the power of sitting there with your words, reading them out, because as they come out your mouth and you hear them land in other people's hearts, there's also magic in that we cannot gift when we're on our own. We cannot gift that to ourselves. And someone says, oh, I love that. And someone says, oh, I wasn't sure. Oh, that carrot. Oh, I want to know more about that. Oh, that really grabbed me. And you feel your words have an impact. That's a residency that happens a lot and so much fun. And yeah, we always have heaps of fun, heaps of laughter. We're a bit daft together. So I'm looking at time. We've got like 7 or 8 questions. Hands up or pop it in the chat. Questions about retreats, residencies, online, plotting, anything. Pop your hand up if you have a question or type it. Claire or Inky or Diane, if you want to unmute yourselves. There must be some questions.
Well, I do have one here that somebody just was emailing. Goodness, we've got all sorts of inputs coming in here. And that was, which I can happy to talk about, is, I don't know, what was it? How do you plot a book? So I love that question because it shows that there's awareness. You have to plot a book. And I'm going to address this quite quickly because I don't have long. In a memoir, in a novel, we plot in what are called scenes or events. Events are small dramatic episodes. And we like to stack them one on one, like a row of dominoes that walk our reader through the story. And events are not thoughts. They're not people or lead characters sitting, thinking about life, wondering, pondering. Events are things that happen. And that's the basis of plotting a book, plotting a memoir, is trying to understand that story is driven by action, not thought. Yes, we want to know what you're thinking. Yes, we want interior monologue. Yes, we want your deep, dark kind of, thoughts that are going on. But the story is not driven by what you're thinking. It's driven by what you're doing. Okay? And the same as at novels. When you plot these books, we want to know what is going to happen. And then that's going to happen. And then this is going to make it worse. And then the car's going to roll. And then the ATM's closed. And then, so we want a list. The beginning of plotting is make a list of all the things that went wrong. And never write. I just did a newsletter. If you guys aren't on my newsletter, please let me know and I'll send you my latest one. And that is literally about, I elaborate on the fact that a book is about a character in terrible trouble in which everything has to go wrong. And in a memoir, that character is you. So how do you list, just a list. This goes wrong, then that, then I make that mistake. Because things that go wrong can be driven by external events and they can be driven by bad decisions. So we need a list, separate, event, decision. Kate's hands up.
No, I just wanted to ask something because I think it was in one of the registration questions is, what about writers that they often call themselves pantsers, so writing by the seat of pants, which is not much structure, not much plotting. So, because, there are different types of writers. So what do you want to say about that creature?
No, I'm not a fan of the pantser writer. I've edited too many books. I've tried to sell too many books to publishers. I know the plotting makes a book sing. I know that you have to have a structure. I don't know. The only pantser is Stephen King. And if you read Stephen King's books, he has something called the all draft method. He does not do a synopsis, outline, or plot. He just writes until he hits 100,000 words. You're going to see that when you read his books. They have a very different narrative structure. So my job is to sell books to publishers, to get authors published. I don't think pantser stories work. Sorry. But go. And then there was another question.
One last question. But Abhijita, I think we've covered this quite a lot on like personal mails. So, but let's just do an overview. So first draft is a writing process. One of Sarah's biggest rules, I will just say it quickly, is you do not edit your work from the day before, from the week before, from the month before. You keep writing until you have your first draft, you put your full stop, you type that last word, and you say, my first draft is done. Then you leave it, then you go into editing. They are completely different brain functions. So writing is more creative, even though you're writing to a structure. Editing is more culling, cutting, looking, manipulating, tweaking. It's a very different set of eyes, and they should not be done at the same time.
I'm on my third draft, so I was just wondering. I finished my third draft, and at that point, I'm just wondering how to integrate. At what point to integrate the editing along with the writing? What point do I feel like the editing is enough?
Yeah, that's so hard because Kate and I, as we said, we've just written our book together, which is coming out early next year. And it's like, you're never done editing.
I shouted at Sarah, like, stop it. Stop it. We're done.
You will always make your book better and better and better. You have to put an end point to it and go, for now, this is my best version. Because the next step, let's say when you're on your third draft, you've got some reader feedback. You've sent it to a beta reader. Maybe you've had a manuscript appraisal and a professional has given you some feedback. You've kind of done your absolutely best version of that book. You have to draw a line in the sand and send your book out. Otherwise, you're going to be playing around with those same words for the next 7 years, and it's not going to get the light of day. So you have to be disciplined in having deadlines and saying to yourself, this is enough now. I can't read this one more time. My eyes are going squiggly. So I believe, honestly, that 4 drafts is enough.
And that's what we end up doing on ours, because eventually you cannot see the words anymore. And we go, oh, should it be there? Should it be there? Oh, should it be there? And you land up going around in circles. And I think often then you start, it's detrimental to your manuscript. Actually, you start actually going backwards.
Yeah.
And so I pitched a published mentorship that we're on now. We're on week 6. Writers have to have a first draft. Then they have to like literally finish their second draft and be done with it and be doing a proposal and be building their brand. And within a 10-week time slot, be sending it off to publishers. Because if it gets picked up by a publisher, it's then going to be professionally edited. If you are self-publishing, we hope like hell you are still getting it professionally edited. So Sarah and I are pretty darn fine writers. We have still had our book professionally edited and professionally proofread and professionally typeset. So that's another 2 sets of eyes on top of ours, professionally paid for. So there's there are people beyond you, whether you self-publish or publish, you've got to know when to stop. Here's another question I'm going to laugh from Renata, who's not Renata. I've heard there's no market in South Africa for fiction. Do you write for local audiences or international? So this is the last question and then we'll wrap up, Sarah.
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say there's no market in South Africa for fiction, but it's a limited market and we sell very few. So I always believe that you write in genre. Where you set your book can be South Africa, can be Namibia, can be Northern America, can be Toronto. It doesn't matter what the setting of your book is, as long as you're in genre. So I want to know it's a romance, or it's a crime, or it's a young adult dystopian fantasy, or it's a new adult. I don't care if it's set in South Africa. The problem with a lot of what we call, and this is my little pet rant, is something called African fiction. Like there's a shelf that's special. I don't believe that. And unfortunately, I think it diminishes the capacity of our writers because, and we've got a few of those writers on a current mentorship, because it needs to be a crime and then meet the crime genres. There are conventions in crime. There are obligatory scenes a crime novel needs. We need certain characters in crime books, like detectives, private investigators. There's got to be a mystery. Crime books are about a mystery. So don't tell me a book is an African book and it doesn't fit in with international standards of genre. So absolutely set it in South Africa and also make sure it's in a publishable genre first. Rant over.
And it's Deirdre asking that.
Okay. Donnelly, I love it. Hello, Deirdre.
Are there any other questions about anything? You can mute, you can pop your hand up, you can do it in the chat. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're 2 minutes over 45, so we're doing pretty well.
I think in closing, Kate, do you have anything to say?
No, Someone's just joined in, so we're just at the end of this call. So we'll be all
get the recording, so just listen to that possibly.
Yeah, I think that the thing for me is always becoming an author, whether it's to give your family your book. We have a lot of moms or dads literally writing their story for one child, for their grandchild. So whether that is what's in your heart or whether you want to be on the best-selling list, it's always the question of how soon do you start and how do you gift yourself permission to follow this dream? Because that magic of telling your story is that essence in your heart and how you want to, no matter how terrifying, because it does require a lot from you and of you, and putting things aside and saying no to certain invitations or social events, or to just actually carve out the time and have the discipline to make this work. It does not happen by itself. There is almost like a natural energy that can start happening when you're in the writing mode, but it requires love and time and energy and commitment. And it is one of the most magnificent journeys you can go on.
I wanted to just close in saying that we have just started a mentorship on Monday, which we have to mention. You can still join it before Thursday, which is our first call. So if that is calling you, if you want to get and write your book in 100 days, and actually it's 4 months, because it's not quite 100 days, that just sounded catchy, then jump on, let us know, send us an email. And I wanted to just finish by saying that agents like myself, publishers and readers are just always on the lookout for good stories and honest stories. Good story doesn't mean good writing. Good story means an honest story. It means clear. It means there's a journey. So please know that that's the business of publishers. They want this stuff and they're just looking for fresh voices, different tones, an edgy take on something. So bring your book together, send it out there into the world, and maybe the magic happens for you and definitely for your readers. So thank you, everybody. We're going to sign off.
Lots of love. Thank you for showing up. And if you're watching the video, sorry you couldn't make it, but there you got to see it anyway. Adios.
Bye-bye.